Okay, a projectile is fired from a cliff 220 feet above the water at an inclination of 45 degrees to the horizontal with a muzzle velocity of 65 feet per second. The height h of the projectile, so whenever you see an h, you should think it's the height of the projectile above the water, and it's given by this formula. They came up with this formula by this information up here, so we don't really need to pay attention to this information anymore. We already have it in the formula form. Now I notice it's a quadratic equation, so right away I'm going to jot down what my a is, what my b is, and what my c is in this quadratic equation. Also, I'm going to note that quadratic equations are parabolas when they are graphed. So when I look at this part A, at what horizontal distance from the face of the cliff is the height of the projectile at a maximum? When I see the word maximum, and I know I'm talking about a quadratic equation, it should be a keyword to me that they're asking for the vertex, because a quadratic equation is a parabola, and if we're trying to find out where it hits a max or a minimum, it's going to be talking about the vertex. Now, since it's asking about the horizontal distance in this part, it's actually just asking for the x-coordinate of the vertex, because x is the horizontal distance. So to find the x-coordinate, we use the formula negative b over 2 times a. When you type that in or plug that in here, simplify it, we're going to get 4,225 over 64. That's the horizontal distance that it hits its maximum. So how far away from the cliff is it when it hits its maximum? It's in a horizontal distance, it's 4,225 over 64. Now part B says find the maximum height of the projectile. Again, we see that word maximum, which is a key word for the vertex. But this time they're asking for the y-coordinate, because the height is our h, and h of x is kind of like our y. We're asking for the y-coordinate of the vertex. So to find the y-coordinate of a vertex after we've already found the x, we take the x and plug it back into the original function, and once we do that, there's a little bit of messy fraction work here that we'll have to solve out, but we should get 32,385 over 128. That's in exact form. If we wanted to figure out what it was in decimal form, we'd have to type this in by dividing, and we'd find out it's about 253 feet above the water when it hits its maximum. Now part C says, at what horizontal distance from the face of the cliff will the projectile strike the water? Well, when it's striking the water, it has no height above the water, right? And since the height above the water is given by this formula, then we would want to set this equation equal to 0, because it has a 0 height above the water. So when it strikes the water, when the height is 0. Now when you have a quadratic equation that's equal to 0, your first instinct should be to factor, or try to factor. But I'm not even going to try this because it has some really weird leading coefficients and things. So I'm not going to try to factor it. So the next step would be try to use the quadratic formula, because the quadratic formula will always be able to solve a quadratic equation that's equal to 0. So when you do that, plug everything in, you're going to get this. But if you try to type this in your calculator, as it is here, 9 out of 10 times your calculator won't give you the right answer back because you did not put in all the right parentheses. I wouldn't even trust myself to put in all the right parentheses where they needed to be in order for the calculator to know what steps to take in the right order. So I would break it down step by step, and I would first try to do inside the root. Within the root, I would actually type in this, maybe this right side first, because we have to multiply first, and then do the subtraction here. And if you did that correctly in your calculator, you should get 7.665. Then I would work on the denominator, figuring out what that is. And lastly, after I found out both of those things, I might type in, finally, all in one step, -1 plus or just -1 plus the square root of 7.665 divided by whatever you got down here. Find out what that was, and then do it again with -1 minus that divided by the denominator. You're going to have to probably throw one of those answers out because they'll be negative, and so the final answer, when it's rounded, the one that we kept would be about 249 feet is where it's going to hit the water, about 249 feet from the cliff.